The way you watch the NFL will be different this year. New faces in the broadcast booth, new faces in the studio, new streaming services to subscribe to. We'll break it all down today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Friday, June 14th, 2024, and I'm your host, John B. from GettingGreenNation.com. Thanking you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. Subscribe to the show for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you get new episodes as soon as they're posted. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast for us, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Today, we're going to talk about the way we watch the Jets. There are some changes to the way the NFL broadcasts will work this year. We have some new faces in broadcast booths. We have some new faces in the studio shows. We have some new streaming services in the mix. So joining me today is Ken Fang of awfulannouncing.com, a website that covers the way media covers sports. Ken is an expert on this stuff. He's a great guest. He's going to have a lot of great insight for us on today's show. Let's get to our discussion with Ken Fang. Joining me today to talk about some changes on the NFL media landscape for 2024 is Ken Fang with awfulannouncing.com, one of my favorite websites. Ken joined us, I think it was 7 years ago. So I think this is the longest gap we had between guest appearances on our show. Ken, thanks so much for joining me today.
Well, John, great to see you. Great to be back on. And let's not make a 7-year gap. It's a 7-year itch. So let's make sure that it's not 7 years in between guest appearances again.
I know that's completely on me because you've been fantastic every time you've been on. So what have you been up to the last 7 years, Ken?
Well, still writing for Awful Announcing. My role's a little bit lesser. I still do the daily viewing picks. So if you're ever looking for now, I want to soften. I just want to lower expectations. It's not a TV guide. It is my picks for what you could be watching that night. So if you complain that there's something missing, I'm not the one to complain to. So, but I still do that, and every once in a while, I will also write for them, do some little bit of contributions, and I'm also, doing some work for a major bank outside. But please don't ask any financial questions. I don't know. So, but that's what I'm doing.
Well, thank you for joining us again, Ken. I don't think there are as many changes this year as there were the last couple of years because, 2 years ago, there were lots of shakeups with the number one teams across the networks. I think, CBS may have been the only one that did not have a shakeup on their number one broadcast team 2 years ago. Last year was the first year of the new NFL media contracts. So you had lots of changes there, but there are still a few things that are going to be a little different this year. And, this is a Jets podcast. So I think, the first thing we'll talk about is what's happening at CBS, even though, as we started recording, we discussed how under the new NFL media contract, CBS actually does not have the AFC games and Fox does not have the NFC games. I think it's technically they're just broadcast games, but at least for the first year of it seemed like the big AFC games all still gravitated to CBS and the big NFC games all gravitated to Fox. So I still think, most Jets games are going to be at CBS this year. And, the big shakeup seems to be on the pregame show where there are some changes. You've got, Phil Simms, a couple New York quarterbacks, Phil Simms, Boomer Esiason are out, Matt Ryan coming in. What can we say about how the CBS pregame show will look different this year?
Well, there's new stewardship over at CBS. Their chairman, David Burson, is replacing Sean McManus. So Burson wanted to put his stamp on the NFL today. So two longtime stalwarts in Boomer Esiason and Phil Simms, their contracts are up, and there was speculation that the show was going to be there was going to be some upheaval and overhaul. I expected Bill Cowher to be part of that, but he's staying. But I guess because in the networks, the whole thing is becoming younger. So you're going to bring in Matt Ryan to replace those two, to replace two quarterbacks in Esiason and Simms. So CBS will look a little bit different. But unless they bring in somebody else, I know that J.J. Watt was also brought in as a contributor last year. He's not going to be a full-time. He's still going to be doing his regular various hits during the season. He's not going to be full-time in the studio. So I think it's going to, instead of having 4 or 5 people that they had, Nate Burleson will stay on as well. And by the way, interesting note that he was named as the host of the New Hollywood Squares today. So interesting note about that. But James Brown will stay. He signed a new contract to remain as the host. Excuse me. But overall, the show is going to look a little bit different for those people who have been used to seeing that cast of for the NFL today. I think going back almost about 5 or 6 years now.
Yeah, I was disappointed to hear that because the Jets got a bunch of Matt Ryan games last year. I mean, Matt Ryan was his first year as an analyst, I think, and he was kind of called the lower level games, which the Jets ran a lot of the lower level games last year. I thought he was fantastic as a game analyst. So I was kind of disappointed to see him move to the studio because I really liked him when he called Jets games last year. Now, full disclosure, I'm a little biased because I went to BC and my 4 years at BC, they were the 4 Matt Ryan years, so I'm a little biased there. But I thought he was great. Like I'm a little disappointed to see him move into the studio myself.
Yeah, he showed a lot of good potential there, and he worked with Andrew Catalon, who of course still had. Excuse me, my voice is sorry about that, but yeah, he has a great connection. Did very well with Andrew Catalon. I think he also worked with Tiki Barber as well, if I'm not mistaken. So he showed a lot of potential. CBS really liked him, and that's why they're putting him on the NFL Today with a little bit higher profile, and he doesn't have to travel as much. So I think that's also a little feather in the cap there for Matt Ryan to get the high profile assignment 2 years into your contract with CBS. That shows you how much confidence they have in him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big studio show guy because
Right.
I don't know, like for me, and I'm sorry, Ken, my listeners are used to hearing me editorialize about this stuff, so they're used to it. You'll have to listen to it now. My issues with the studio shows, I just feel like in this day and age, like they cram all these analysts onto the set, and this is true like across across sports. They have like 4 or 5 analysts at every time, and it's like they have to have their segments with the social media, they have to have the segments with the insider, and I just don't feel like there's enough time to like really go into this stuff. So, and like I'll go into like a little story. Is like a lot of people, I got into the women's NCAA tournament this year because I started following Caitlin Clark, and I started watching. I'm like, hey, this is pretty good. Like I really in the men's tournament, really. I mean, outside of NC State, I didn't think the men's tournament was that compelling. ESPN had the studio show, and I really liked it, and I couldn't figure out why until the very end. Is because they only had 2 analysts. So like they really go, there was enough time for them to like break down things and like have more in-depth conversations. So I don't know. For me, it's like I just am not a big fan of the studio shows these days. That's just a personal opinion of mine.
No, I'll agree with you. I always joke, and I put this on my Twitter. I know I said X down there below, but it's really Twitter. Let's all be honest with you. It's really Twitter. So I like to put on a picture that I've saved over the years from the Democratic National Convention in 2016 when CNN had 8 people on the set. I said, this is what ESPN is going to be doing down the line. They're going to be instead of having, and they're getting close. They've had 6 people on the set one time. So I said, this is what the networks are aiming for: 8 people on the set and a host. So that really means 9. So I'm really I dread that. I agree with you. There's too many people on. I would go back and every once in a while go down a YouTube rabbit hole and watch some of the old pregame shows from the NBC or CBS, and yet Brian Gumbel with Mike Adamle, and that worked because they're just focused on the games and the highlights and features. They have more time to do that. But because when you have 5 or 6 people on the set, you have to shoehorn everybody in. And the big complaint, of course, about ESPN and the NBA's halftime is that you have 5 people on the set and a 1-minute segment. So you got to shoehorn everybody in for 10 seconds at a time, and it really doesn't work. So and I know that the NFL's pregame shows are like between 2 hours or 1 hour, depending on what network you're watching. But even with that much time, you still have to shoehorn everybody and try to get everybody in. And I feel for the hosts because they got to be like a distributor and a point guard. And, if you don't get somebody in, I know you're going to get some complaints about that. So, to go down to, for at least for CBS for now, from what we understand, is probably going to have 4 people on the set instead of 5. I think that, it is what it is. But I agree that you get all your pregame information from the internet now. The pregame shows are kind of obsolete, but the networks still say they're necessary because that's how they kind of make their money. So, it is what it is.
And like the other thing I'd say is that if you only have 10 seconds, that kind of incentivizes you to give the hottest take to get the most attention.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's and like you said, it's all about social media now. It's all about trying to get your takes on and getting noticed. Every week during the football season, CBS will send me the favorite clips of some of the hot takes that some of their analysts would be making, and I'm not interested in it because it's an hour before the games, and I'm really getting all set and ready to watch, whether it's whether it's Red Zone or whether it's one of the games, because I love the Browns living in New England. That certainly makes a lot of sense. So, I tried to watch them on Sunday Ticket through YouTube TV and getting everything ready. So I'm really not listening to the pregame shows, even though I do have it on just as background noise as I'm getting my sandwiches and getting my wings ready. So, it is what it is. As like I said, the networks want to make their money. That's how they that's how they kind of make their money off of it, because that's where they get to control the content and get to sell all their ads.
Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Let's talk about, I know there are some big changes going on right now at NFL Network. Could you kind of just summarize? I know that we talked about this before we started recording. There are a ton of them. So could you give us the Cliff Notes version of what's going on at NFL Network right now?
Yeah, I really feel bad for them because a lot of good people have been laid off. They eliminated their show, their signature show, which started. Rich Eisen started it all off with NFL Total Access. It was supposed to be their version of SportsCenter, and so every night you knew at 7:00 on NFL Network, at least on the East Coast, that's where you turn to get your latest NFL news. But now with the internet and highlights and information, they decided to de-emphasize that show, and the NFL Network is probably going to be sold to ESPN down the line. We don't know that, but they've been talking. The NFL Network, when the NFL wants to get out of the TV business, at least in that end, running their own network. Hard to think of because they were really, and you remember this, John, they had the original home of Thursday Night Football, and they had those games, and the New York market was really angry when the Giants and Patriots were going to get together and for the season one, and the Patriots were going to go for their unbeaten season, and the NFL finally relented and put it on like 3 or 4 networks at that game. So yeah, it was a big thing at the time. But the NFL Network now has decided to de-emphasize. They've laid a lot of people off, and Andrew Siciliano was one of those. Was one of the people who have lost their jobs. Instead, they're moving their morning show, which was the last New York-based show, Good Morning Football. Jamie Erdahl was the host of that, and she's going to be moving along with that. Kyle Brandt, who is a part of that, he's going to be on the show, but I think he's going to do it remotely. And they're not only going to have it on NFL Network, they're also going to have it on syndicate a show on local stations through Sony Television. So a lot of interesting things that are happening at NFL Network right now. In the 7:00 slot, they're showing The Insiders, which is done cheaply because they don't have to have a studio. Everyone's remotely from their home studios. So it's really sad what's happening to the NFL Network because, I used to be able to go over there at 7:00, go on, watch NFL Total Access, get my NFL information. Because in New England, I can't get my Browns information. They would report on what's going on over there for maybe about 2-3 minutes, get my info, and I get out. But it's really sad to see what's happening to the NFL Network because, as I mentioned, it was a signature. You could see when the players wanted to be talked to, or after the games, they would go right to NFL Network and talk to them because they had the access. But it's not to be anymore. And I really don't know what the NFL is doing with that channel anymore. I think they just might as well shutter it if they're going to do this. If they're going to like get rid of all these studio shows and all this great talent that they have, they just might as well just shut the channel down and or just sell it to ESPN as the rumors are having it right now, John.
How much of this do you think is just due to like the decline overall of cable?
A lot. NFL Network used to, if you remember the fights that they used to have to get carriage on Comcast or all of the cable providers. It was a big fight for a long time in the aughts. It was like, please call your cable operator to get NFL Network. It was on DirecTV. I had DirecTV at the time, so I was able to get it. And I was able to watch the very first day with Rich Eisen and all that. It was great. For me, it was great. As a big NFL fan, it was like, I'm in heaven. It's a channel devoted 24/7 to the NFL. But as you mentioned, now that the emphasis of cable and everyone's going to streaming, the NFL wants to be where the viewers are. And it used to be the NFL Network used to be in 75, 85 million homes. I think they're in like 40 now because of the cable operators and also Comcast deciding to putting it on a different tier. So it's hard to find. So the NFL saying we're not making as much money anymore. Let's de-emphasize the channel and go to. I really wouldn't be surprised that if they do sell it or if they do keep it, that it goes to all streaming and they put it on their NFL Plus app or something like that so we all have to pay for it. I wouldn't be surprised. The NFL loves money, so they're going to go where the money is, and that looks like that's where it's heading.
Yeah, and I remember, you mentioned they were the original home of Thursday Night Football, and I remember there's one specific game. It was 2007. It was the Thursday after Thanksgiving. It was Dallas Green Bay, and both teams they were tied for like the top spot, the lead in the NFC, and like I couldn't watch it. That was actually the first game Aaron Rodgers got significant playing time in because Brett Favre got injured during that game.
Yes.
The Rodgers came in and actually played really well, and I remember like being so upset. And I always thought like the NFL was going to add more games to NFL Network because it was one of those things that could incentivize cable providers to start carrying them. I thought there was eventually going to be a playoff game on NFL Network just to like force the cable companies to carry them. And now it's like I guess it shows you the sign of the times. I guess it shows you kind of the direction the industry is going in.
Yeah, I mean they had as many as 13 Thursday night football games before they sold it off to the package off to CBS, and of course it was that carousel and with the CBS, NBC, CBS and NBC shared it, then Fox took it before Amazon had took the whole thing, and NFL Network is no longer. I mean, they only have 7 games now, and I think they're all in London. So, and also a triple header in Week 15, which actually they're selling off too. So it's interesting to see how the NFL Network, which was at one time a big prime and a big priority for the league, is now just being de-emphasized and almost practically. And if they do sell it off to ESPN, probably sold off for parts.
Yeah, and it's one of those. I guess it's again, talking about like industry-wide shifts. It's kind of the pivot away from cable, where ESPN's the behemoth in this space, so ESPN will be fine and they'll keep Monday Night Football. But everything else, it's either broadcast networks or it's streaming, and it feels like like when we talk about Fox or CBS or NBC, they all have their own streaming services where they kind of simulcast the games. But of course, Thursday Night Football has moved to Amazon. And there's going to be games on Netflix now on Christmas, right?
Yep. Yeah, they sold 2 games off to Netflix. This again, the NFL is trying to find a revenue stream where they didn't have it before. We all thought, at least those of us who follow the media, always thought that when there was a Christmas game, Fox would have it, but I guess not. So, the NFL does what the NFL does, and they say if they're going to find a media stream, they're going to find one. And to get Netflix with their their global subscriber base and the ability to stream this worldwide, the NFL, that's what they want, and to increase a potential audience and get subscribers where they normally can't. If they sold it to Fox. So here's the situation. They're going to get 2 games. I think Kansas City is going to be in one of them. Kansas City, I think, has the strangest scheduling. I think they're going to be playing 3 games within 15 games at one point, which is really ridiculous. If we're interested about player safety, we won't get into that. But anyway, it's just the fact that the NFL is trying to increase its audience and to try to get to Netflix. You have to consider this, John. You've got Peacock, which is going to have an opening weekend game. Okay, so that's going to be in Brazil. You're also going to have an ESPN Plus game, which is going to be exclusive on a Monday night. You're also going to have Amazon, and you're going to have Netflix. That's 4 streaming services that I count. I think there's going to be one more. I believe that's all an exclusive game as well. So consider this: 5 years ago, you didn't have to worry about this. You just had to worry about your NFL Network, your CBS, your NBC, your ESPN, and Fox to watch the games. Now you've got an increased amount of places, and you have to. It's all behind the paywall. I mean, I'm not as angry as some consumers who are angry about having to find the games, and I totally get it. I understand that. And if you don't subscribe to one of these services and your team is on there and you're not in the local market, you have to find a way to watch it. And I totally understand how people are angry and thinking, why is there another streaming service involved? Why I used to watch the games for free. Totally understand that. But again, it's the NFL. The NFL has never cared about the regular fan and the regular consumer going back years, and they just want to. It's all about making money. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see something on the Playboy channel down the lane. I'm being facetious. They're not going to do that, but that's whoever pays the money and ponies up, that's where they're going to go.
So I have no discipline, so I've subscribed to every single streaming service there
Me
is.
too. Yeah.
There's no problem with me, but I draw a distinction between like something like Amazon and the others. I hate like the one-off thing. So like last year they played that playoff game on Peacock, and everybody it was the Dolphins Chiefs. They played the exclusive to Peacock, and everybody went crazy. And my view on this was kind of nuanced. My view was I feel like people complaining that they're moving to streaming services are making complaints that are kind of similar to what was probably made like 30, 40 years ago when games moved to cable. Like it's just the way people consume content is changing. It was inevitable. My issue, though, with the NFL putting the game on Peacock is, if I'm not mistaken, they had literally one game that was exclusive to Peacock during the regular season. I think they had a Christmas Eve game.
Yes.
So it's like, you don't you don't condition the fans all season long. For me, it would be different if they put the game on Amazon, because Amazon has Thursday Night Football. Going into the season that there is a portion of games that if you want to watch, you need to subscribe to Amazon. So to me, that's fine. I don't like the one-offs. I'm not a big fan of putting 2 games on Netflix on Christmas, or the Peacock game last year. I think this year the game that was on Peacock will be on Amazon. So that problems. But so that's, for me, that's like where I draw the distinction is like, if you have like a slate of games that are on, and you're going to get a game every single week on Amazon, and you don't have to subscribe, then I don't think you can really complain about missing the playoffs. But like, to like put one game here or there, that's where I have an issue. That's where I think they're doing a disservice to the fans.
Absolutely. And the fact was, it was Kansas City as well. It was Miami and Kansas City in prime time. I think if people would have understood if it was if they put like, maybe it was like a 4:30 game or afternoon, but you're putting a game on prime time, and that where everybody wants to watch, everyone's going to be home, and then your people who had not subscribed to Peacock, and they weren't going to do a free trial for it either. So again, people were thinking, oh, no one's going to watch, but then the NFL announced the following day, oh, we had 20 million people watching it. I'm like, okay, I don't know where they got their figures from, but okay, that's, people did find it. So, but I totally agree. It's one thing John, to have one thing to like, again, the one-offs, going to Netflix for 2 games where they haven't had any games all season long. And then, last year, Peacock just had that primetime game. I think it was in week 15 or 16. And then they somehow got rewarded with a primetime game for a wild card. So I totally get it. I totally understand the anger and the vitriol, especially when you're used to seeing games in a certain manner, and then you get this one-off with Peacock. And like you mentioned, people have gotten used to Amazon having the Thursday night games, and they're going to continue on with a likely a prime time Saturday night wild card game during wild card weekend. We'll have Al Michaels back in the postseason after a 1-year absence. So it'll be interesting to see how Amazon handles it. But they've handled Thursday Night Football pretty decently in the 3 years that they've had it. So I think they'll probably be doing fine again when they get the finally get the wild card game this season.
One last Netflix question: do we have any sense of what the broadcast crew will be for that game?
No, we do not. the NFL does require on their games network quality. They wouldn't hire like a Barstool to come in and do something like that. So I would probably expect if Netflix wants to have, let's say, one of the networks produce it for it and give it like a Kevin Harlan doing it, I don't think anyone would object to that. But it's we'll see what happens. I mean, Amazon decided to use NBC's have sell it to NBC to have their crew produce the games for them. I mean, that's where Al Michaels came in, and a lot of the people who were doing Sunday Night Football went over to Thursday Night Football. So that's why you had network quality on their games when they could hit the ground running. As far as Netflix is concerned, we have no idea. We don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if they somehow decided to, instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, bring in Fox or bring in CBS to help produce the games. But we have not heard whatsoever. And I think that's one thing that we at Awful Announcing will be watching very closely. And we will be watching very closely how the games are produced and how they're called, because, you don't want to have, Netflix has had some issues before with live events. Whether it was the Love is Blind, reunion show or golf or tennis. They've had live tennis and they've had glitches and with issues on that. So we'll have to wait and see. I don't think they're going to have those issues because the NFL requires their partners to have they can't skimp on it. Let's just put it that way. And I don't think they will. And if they don't want to have issues hiring a network crew to come in and just saying, hey, we're going to rent you for 2 games, maybe do a CBS and a Fox crew. I don't, that's the safe way to run it. But Netflix is Netflix, so we'll see what they do. And who knows? Maybe they'll have Love is Blind on there, try to do a reunion show at halftime. We'll see.
I have to get caught up on Love is Blind, so no spoilers. Let's talk now about the big change in the Fox team this year, and that is Tom Brady joining the number one crew. And I have a couple thoughts on this. The first is I feel bad for Greg Olson, who I think was a really good announcer. And this is probably, look, I'm a Jets fan. It's in my DNA to dislike Tom Brady. 20 years, you're not going to undo 20 years of you're not going to undo 20 years of like rooting against Tom Brady. But I think what did he get, like a $375 million contract?
That's huge. And by the way, you'll hate this, John. Tonight is the Tom Brady event at Gillette Stadium when he gets the number retired, and he's going to go into Patriots Hall of Fame. All the TV stations have been live from there, so they're doing team coverage, and they were starting at 4:30 this morning, so Eastern time. So I'm be glad that you didn't see that at all, John. I'm hearing it, through my radio and through my TV today, so it's not fun. But as a Browns fan, I don't want to see that. But it's interesting how Fox went into this. They're thinking that, because it's a Tony Romo effect. Because had Tony Romo not done well on CBS or had not come into with a big hype and just came in with guns blazing. I mean, we all remember his first games. He was the poster child for analysts. He was doing so well. I mean, obviously there's been a fall off, but Fox was thinking, okay, maybe Tom Brady can be our Tony Romo, and we'll just have a stopgap measure and bring in Greg Olson in, especially after Fox decided to let Troy Aikman and Joe Buck go. So they said, okay, we'll bring in Tom Brady, but we'll have Kevin Burkhardt, who of course has a New York connection and New Jersey connection on SNY when he was in back in the day, and also Greg Olson, who were the number 2 team to step up. I don't think Fox expected Greg Olson to be this good and do it. He said he was going to make it really hard for Fox to make this decision, and he really has. He's won sports Emmys 2 years in a row, one for emerging talent, and then this year for best overall game analyst. That's how good he's become. So, and when he did the Super Bowl, everyone said, my God, he's really going to be good. And if I'm NBC, I would have made a play for NBC to sign him, to put him on Sunday Night Football to be a potential replacement for Chris Collinsworth, because Collinsworth is, I hate to say this, I think he's good, but there's been some fall off, for at least in my opinion, for him. So you would have a great team in Tirico and Olson, but Fox, I think, had a deal to make sure that Olson would be there, and also I think he's there in case Tom Brady gets bored and decide to come back. We don't know, because Brady has said he might come back. We don't know. And he's also a part owner of the Las Vegas Raiders, so there's that conflict of interest issue there too. So, but we've all heard the stories, at least those of us who follow media, that Brady has done practice games with Kevin Burkhardt. He's asked Joe Buck and gotten advice. He's talked to Greg Olson too. He's talked to a lot of analysts, but we really won't know until he gets into the booth to see how he does. As someone who has lived in New England for most of my life, hearing Tom Brady on media shows, he was on WEEI every week. He gave nothing. He's pretty much devoid of personality. So I don't know what Fox saw in him to give him such a high profile job, but they must know something that maybe they know something that we as fans don't, and analysts and those of us who follow the media don't. Because, we didn't think that Tony Romo would be good when he first started. Of course, as we mentioned, Romo's had a fallout and fall off, and there's been some complaints about his analysis. But unless Tom Brady comes in and does like the Nostradamus thing that Tony Romo did when he first started, and saying, hey, he knew that he could tip you off the plays and predict the plays and where they could go, left or right. Unless he does something like that, he's got to really blow us away, because there's a lot of high expectations to him. And I feel really, as you mentioned, Greg Olson, he made it really hard for Fox to make this move, and he's going to be on the number 2 team with Joe Davis this season, which will probably be better than Kevin Burkhardt and Brady.
Yeah, like part of me feels like Brady's so Brady's so savvy, like watching what's happening on the field, that maybe he can be like an early Romo, but
yeah.
I mean, look, it's not my money, so I shouldn't care. But $375 million to get Brady over, I think, 10 years, and I don't think like anybody watches the game for the announcers anymore. This isn't like the Cosell, Don Meredith, Giffords Monday Night Football. It's not even John Madden, where like there were times where people would tune in just to see the announce. I don't think anybody was going to watch. I don't think anybody was not going to watch a game who now will watch it because Tom Brady's calling it.
100%. I mean, like you mentioned, it was Madden. I think Bill Walton was the other one, because you had no idea, because those two could make the game better by going off on a tangent. There's not many people I don't think there's anybody right now that I would think of that I'm going to definitely watch the game because of them. You watch the game because it's your team that's playing in it, or the Super Bowl. You don't really care who's calling it, because you want to either watch the game, watch the commercials, or watch the halftime show. Same thing with if you're a regular season fan like me with the Browns. Yes, I wasn't happy with some of the announcing crews that CBS that assigned to it, but I don't care. It's just I could either find a way to just mute the audio, or just find the radio call and try and sync it up to the TV. So I really. In following the media, it's really funny, because they think, oh, it's the personalities. We'll get this guy to come in. We'll get this person to call the games, and they'll be really fun. But, when it comes down to it, we just watch the games because of the games. And I think the networks really have to understand that.
The only exception I make is like sometimes I'll watch the Manning cast on Monday Night Football just for the.
Mm-hmm.
And I like it when they're actually breaking down. Like, I mean, I think some of the guests, I'm not a big fan when they bring the guests on, but when they actually like break down like what's happening on the film, I think there's interest. I remember a couple of years ago, there was one where Peyton Manning talked about how he knew the other team's defense so well that like he knew exactly what they were running. And the linebacker ran to the wrong spot, so he threw an interception. He told a story about how like he had to walk back to the sideline and try to explain to the coach that he did everything right. The linebacker messed up, who picked off the pass. So like that's something I think is interesting. Which I guess I'll leave that. Let that lead into a question. Do you think we're going to see more things like that, where there's kind of like more than one option to watch a game? I know ESPN does that for like a lot of like the big college football games, where they give you like, I mean, I don't know that we're going to see like 7 options for regular games, but you have the Manning cast for Monday Night Football. Do you think like that the networks, especially now that they have the bandwidth on streaming, might experiment more with giving you different ways to watch the game, a couple different parallel broadcasts depending on what your interest is?
I'm surprised that NBC hasn't done it with Sunday Night Football, but again, you've got to find the right pairing. The Mannings were lightning in a bottle, and the fact is that they're brothers and they already had this pre-existing chemistry. It works very well. And one of my favorite parts of the Manning cast is when Eli talks about Peyton's big forehead. And I think that's really funny because he knows when the game is getting boring, he'll say, oh, by the way, Peyton, a nice forehead. And we'll show that big picture of the big head and start punching it. And it's funny. It's actually really funny because you actually feel that Eli still has some resentment towards Peyton. I know it's a bit, but it's funny. I just find that funny. And it's just great to watch them. And as you mentioned, when they break down tape, I find that more fascinating when they have guests on. And I really think that they should go down to 2 guests than having 3 or 4 because the guests get in the way. But as far as the other networks are concerned, it's trying to find that right chemistry. ESPN is using Kevin Hart for the NBA finals. And okay, that's all right. It's nothing great, but it's harmless. It's fun to watch because Kevin Hart is an NBA fan and he can say things. And during the women's Final Four, you had the Sue Bird and Diana Taurasi, who have a pre-existing great relationship from their times at UConn, and they're very funny about it. And so you have that too. But those are rare. You can't force chemistry. ESPN tried it on Sunday Night Baseball with Michael Kay and Alex Rodriguez on Sunday Night Baseball, and they were terrible. Even though you thought that Kay knew A-Rod from the Yankee days, they just didn't work very well, and ESPN decided to not do it anymore. So you can try, but you got to find the right people to do it. And I'd like to think that we would try to see something with Sunday Night Football, maybe on Peacock. But again, you got to find the right people to do it, and you got to find the right relationships. Otherwise, it's just going to be like the Sunday Night Baseball K-Rod broadcast, which didn't work at all. So.
Well, Ken, after 7 years, I think we still have pretty good chemistry. Thank you so much for joining me, and we'll try and make it sooner next time.
Absolutely. I mean, 6 years would be fine too. I mean, that at least is less than 7.
I'm going to try and have you on before 2030.
Okay, fantastic.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.
That's all for our episode today. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoyed the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoyed the show and listening on the podcast first, give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoyed the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your weekend. We'll be back next week to talk more Jets.